Welcome to my channel. He was the boy I raised with all my heart. I taught him how to walk, how to read, how to love without fear. But I never imagined that one quiet night, long after the noise of life had settled, he would be the one to teach Mesumi thing. Something I never even knew I needed. What he said, what he did, it changed me in a way I'll never forget. Tell me in the comments, what city are you watching us from? I love seeing how far our stories reached out now. Let me take you back to that night, the night that shifted everything. When you've lived long enough, you start to believe you've seen it all. I'm 63 years old, and I've worn every title a woman can wear. Daughter, wife, nurse, mother, widow. My days had begun to blur into another. Quiet mornings, long walks, late dinners for one. I'd made peace with it. Or at least I thought I had. Henry had always been a good boy. Smart, kind, sensitive in a way. That mad at people stop and look twice. When he lost his father at 8, he clung to me like a lifeline, and I never let go. I gave him all I had, every ounce of warmth, every patient word, every late night hug. It was just the two of us for a long time. And when he turned 18 and left for college, the silence he left behind was deafening. But that summer, he came home taller, his shoulders broader, but still with that same softness in his eyes when he looked at me. I didn't think much of Eid at first, just my baby back in my house. I made his favorite meals, folded his laundry with the same tender care he always had. He'd sometimes sit across from me and just watch like he was studying me, memorizing something. One night after dinner, the air felt heavier than usual. A storm had rolled in. Distant thunder rumbled like a warning or a promise. I couldn't tell which. I lit candles around the living room just to soften the edges of the shadows. Henry walked in, his hair slightly damp from the rain, a quiet smile on his lips. "Why don't you ever let anyone take care of you, Mom?" He's like it was just a normal question, like he was asking if I needed help with the dishes. I chuckled, trying to shake it off. That's not how it works, sweetheart. Moms take care of everyone else. It's in the job description. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, really looked at me, and sat beside me on the couch. The candle light flickered right over his face, highlighting the man he was becoming, or maybe the man he already was. "You've given everything to everyone. You never stop. Don't you ever think about what you need?" Let's stop it. My throat tightened and I glanced away. Nobody asked me that. Not in years. I was always the one holding things together, even when I felt like I was falling apart. "I'm fine," I said too quickly. Really? Henry leaned in, his voice low, calm. "You don't have to be strong right now." The air seemed to shift again. That quiet moment stretched between us, warm and intimate. I could feel something stirring inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Not lust, not even longing. It was deeper than that. It was recognition of myself reflected in someone else's care. He reached for my hand and I let him take it. His fingers were warm, steady. I looked down at our hands, his tongue gently brushing over my knuckles, and suddenly it was all too much. The silence, the kindness, the way he saw him, really saw me. "I don't know how," I whispered. He looked confused. How to what? How to let Simeon hold me, to really let go. His expression softened. "Then let me show you." I felt tears prick the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. My body leaned slightly into his without thinking, like muscle memory from long ago. But it wasn't motherly this time. It was something else. I didn't know what to call it. I only knew that it didn't feel wrong. He wrapped an arm around my shoulder, and I rested my head against him, letting my cheek touch the soft fabric of his shirt. His heart beat steadily under my ear. I hadn't realized how much I missed that sound, that closeness. Minutes passed, maybe hours. The storm outside had settled into a soft, persistent drizzle, In that quiet, I let go. Not all at once, not dramatically, but enough to breathe. He didn't say anything more. He just held me and I let him. That night in that living room, my son reminded me that I was more than the roles I had lived. I was still a woman, still capable of being held, still worthy of being seen. And that realization whispered between candlelight and the hush of rain was, only the beginning. The morning after felt strangely still. The rain had gone, Butit's scent lingered in the air. That damp, earthy perfume that clings to Thorndowsel and makes you want to wrap yourself in something soft. I woke up slowly, confused by the weightlessness I felt in my chest, as though something he'd been carrying for years had quietly slipped away. In the night, I sat at the edge of my bed, the sheets slightly rumpled, and tried to recall every detail of the evening before. Not just what happened, but how I felt. The touch of Henry's hand in mine, the sound of his breath in the quiet, the unspoken understanding that seemed to pass between us. I didn't feel ashamed. That was the most surprising thing of all. I walked into the kitchen barefoot, my robe pulled tight around me. The morning light stretched long across the tile floor, and I found him there, already awake, already making coffee. He was wearing a white t-shirt, loose at the shoulders, his hair still messy from sleep. But when he turned to look at me, his eyes were clear, intent. "Morning," he said, offering a small smile. "Morning," I returned, my voice a little raw. I couldn't tell if it was from sleep or something else. He handed me a cup without a word. Just like he used to when he was little, bringing me coffee after trying to help with breakfast. But this was different. There was knuckledish eagerness in it. Only calm dot, we sat at the kitchen table facing each other like we had 1,000 mornings before. But the air was different now, warmer, heavier, full of things neither of us knew how to say. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked after a moment. I nodded better than I have in a while. He leaned back slightly, watching me over the rim of his mug. I meant what I said last night. I swallowed. "I know, and I want to say more, if you'll let me." My heart skipped. I didn't know what meant. Not fully, but I nodded anyway, because something in me needed to hear it, even if it scared me a little. He leaned forward, both elbows on the table now, his fingers stippled under his chin. "You've spent your whole life giving. I've watched you pour yourself out for everyone, even when there was nothing left. But no one ever taught you how to receive, to feel good without guilt." The lump in me throat returned. I stared down at Theodable, blinking back whatever emotion was threatening to rise. "I'm not trying to confuse you," he added softly. I've seen how lonely you've been. You try to hide it. But I see it in your eyes and the way you hold your breath when you think no one's looking. I let out a quiet, shaky laugh. "You always swear too perceptive for your own good." He reached across the table and took my hand again. There was something grounding about it, steadying. "I want you to know what it feels like to be cared for, not just by anyone, but by someone who sees all of you. The woman beneath the mom, the heart you've hidden under years of responsibility." I met his eyes, and in that moment, I saw no confusion in them. No childish fantasy, only clarity. "But you're my son," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "I know," he replied, and his voice didn't waver. "But I'm also a man now, and I care about you. Not just because you raise Edma, but because you're beautiful and strong, and you deserve to be looked at like you matter." Silence thick and humming between us. I stood up slowly, not sure what I was doing in it, till I did it. I walked around Theodable, and he looked up at me, not with expectation, but invitation. My hand found his shoulder, and then after a moment, the sight of his face. His cheek was warm beneath my palm. I didn't know what to do with this. I whispered. "You don't have to know," he said, standing now, his voice low. "Just feel, just be here." I should have stepped away. I knew that the world would have told me to run, to bury the moment, to pretend it never existed. But the world hadn't been with Meth for all those lonely years. The world didn't see the hollow parts inside Meth way he did. And in that moment, Allie wanted was to be seen, to be touched, not as a mother, but as a woman who had been waiting, even if she didn't know it. He gently brushed a lock of hair behind my ear. The touch was soft, reverent. "I won't do anything you don't want," he said, his tone clear. "But if you want me to stop pretending I don't see you this way, I will." My breath itched. I didn't answer with words. I simply stayed close, letting my forehead rest against his, letting the warmth of his presence calm the wild thudding of me heart. And in that quiet space, breath against breath, hand to hand, I allowed the door inside me to creak open just a little wider dot. It wasn't everything. Not yet. But it was enough to know that whatever this was becoming, it was something real. The days that followed were filled with a strange shinquit. Nothing outwardly changed. Westel moved through the house like we always had. I still cooked dinner, folded laundry, sat out on the porch in the evenings, sipping tea. Henry still helped with the dishes, mowed the lawn, and played old jazz records he knew I loved. But between us there was something charged, unspoken, yet thick in the air, like electricity before a storm. I caught myself watching him when he wasn't, looking, how the curve of his jaw had sharpened, how his hands had become those of a man, strong, confident, unafraid. And then I'd look away, my cheeks warm with something I hadn't felt in years, anticipation, a thrill I hadn't let myself believe I could still feel. One afternoon, I was in the garden on my knees by the hydrangeas, tucking gently at the weeds around their base. The sun hung low, gold and warm, painting everything in a soft, dreamy haze. I didn't hear Henry approach, not until I felt his shadow stretch over me. "Need help?" he asked, and I looked up. He wasn't wearing a shirt, just a pair of worn jeans, his skin sun-kissed, damp from sweat. He'd been fixing the shed door earlier, and now, standing there above me, he looked so sure of himself, not so present. "I think I've got it," I said, wiping dirt from my hands, trying to focus on anything but how close he was. Still, he crouched down beside me anyway, not to help, but just to be near. He reached for a weed I'd missed it in, pulled it with an easy grip. Tossing it aside, our shoulders brushed, my breath caught. "You've always worked so hard," he said, not looking at me. "Even now, it's like, hey, don't know how to rest, Dot. It's not that," I said. My voice low, Dot. "It's just when you've been alone long enough, you find ways to stay busy. It makes the silence less loud." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I felt my insides shift under his gaze. "I didn't want you to feel alone anymore," he said. His words settled on my skin like sunlight, gentle, but warm enough to melt something frozen inside me. I stood brushing off my knees. "Come in," I said without thinking. "I cold you something cold too. Drink." We walked inside together, the kitchen filling with the scent of soil and sweat in summer. I poured lemonade, my hands a little shaky, and we sat at the kitchen table again like so many times before, but this time I could feel the edge of something. Between us, sharp and glinting, he reached for my hand. It was almost a routine now, him taking it, me letting him. But today I didn't just let him, I held his hand back. The silence stretched, comfortable and yet electric. "What are we doing, Henry?" I asked, definitely afraid of the answer, but more afraid of never asking. He didn't flinch. "Something we both feel." He said, "Dot, something that's been growing between us for a long time. You're my son." I whispered the words more like a question than a statement. "Ignore," he said softly, firmly, "but I'm also more than that. I'm someone who sees you, all of you, and I think maybe you're finally seeing me too." I didn't speak, couldn't. my chest waist-tight with fear, confusion, and a gnashing hunger to be touched. In a way that wasn't about obligation or routine, to be held for no reason at all, except that someone wanted to. He stood up, stepped around the table, and leaned down beside me. One hand rested gently on the back of my chair, the other slid across my shoulder. Not in a rush, not in demand, but full of quiet certainty. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his face inches from mine, but I didn't because I didn't want him to. Instead, I tilted my head, closing that final distance between us. Our lips met soft at first, tentative, searching. A kind of kiss that doesn't ask for permission but waits for a sign, and I gave it. The moment deepened. His hand slid behind my neck, fingers tangled in me hair. I felt the heat I hadn't known in decades, not just physical, but emotional, a fire that ignited in the space where fear met surrender. When we pulled apart, we didn't speak. We just breathed each other in forehead to forehead, eyes closed, letting the weight of what just happened settle over us like a blanket. "I don't know what this means," I said, voice trembling. "You don't have to," he replied. "All that matters is what it feels like." I nodded slowly because it did feel like something honest, something powerful, something I hadn't dared to want. That night, the house was quiet again, but not the same kind of quiet. This time it was full of memory, of possibility, of change. I went to bed. I left my door open. The air that night was heavy with stillness, not the kind that creeps in with dread, but the kind that waits. Every corner of the house seemed hushed, like the walls themselves were listening. I lay in bed, the covers drawn lightly over me, my heart loud in my chest. The door was open. My room was dim, bathed in the soft amber light from the hallway. And I was awake, not from restlessness, but anticipation. I had told myself not to expect anything. That leaving the door open didn't mean more than it had to. But deep down I knew. I knew I was inviting something in, or maybe just allowing something that had been knocking quietly for longer than I dared admit. The floorboards creaked gently, a familiar sound, steady footsteps, my breath caught. Then Henry appeared in Theater Way. He didn't speak. He just looked at me for a long moment, not as a child seeking permission and not as someone unsure. There was a calm in his expression, a quiet understanding that this wasn't something rash or fleeting. This was the result of 1,000 soft moments stacked on top of each other, years of closeness, of learning, of trust. He stepped inside. I shifted, sitting up slightly. My robe is still wrapped loosely around me, the fabric slipping a little off Miss Holder. He noticed. His eyes lingered, not with hunger, but with reverence, like he was seeing something sacred. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low but steady. I nodded. He came to the edge of the bed and sat beside me, his chin finding mine, fingers interlacing easily, like they'd always belonged at Fear. I turned to face him fully, our knees brushing, the space between. "You charged, but gentle. I don't want this to be something you'll wake up and regret," he said. "I won't," I whispered, and I meant it, because this wasn't about crossing limits or breaking rules. It was about opening a door I hadn't even known existed inside me. A door that led to a version of myself I tucked away years ago. The woman who longed to be seen, to be touched, to be loved not for what she gave, but for who she was. He leaned in slowly, giving me all the time in the world to stop him. I didn't. Our lips met again, this time deeper, slower, more certain. His hand moved to the small of my back, pulling me gently into him, and I let myself melt. Every worry, every fear, every voice that ever told me what I was allowed to feel, they all slipped away. What followed was not rushed, not frantic. It was quiet, tender, a giving and receiving that unfolded in whispers and glances, and the slow, deliberate movements of two people discovering each other with reverence. We didn't speak much that night. Wouldn't need to. When it was over, he stayed beside me, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm that lulled mine till the safest sleep I'd had in years. His arm draped lightly across my waist, my fingers resting against his skin, still warm from where we'd been. I woke before him, the sun just beginning to cast its gold across the sheets. I turned to look at him, his lashes resting against his cheek, the faintest hint of a smile on his lips, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not because everything made sense, but because, for once, I wasn't fighting myself. I had stopped living by what I thought I was supposed to feel, and started listening to what I actually did. He stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open. When he saw me watching him, he smiled. Small, genuine, soft. "Hey," he murmured. "Hey." We lay there for a long time, not moving, not rushing the morning. There was no guilt in my chest, no shame lingering. Behind my ribs, only warmth, only presence. Eventually, I rose and pulled on a robe, stepping out onto the porch as the sun climbed the sky. The world felt new. Not because everything had changed, but because I had. Henry joined me moments later, too, mugs of coffee in hand. He handed me one, and we sat in silence, watching the breeze stir the leaves in the trees. No words could have summed up what we were or where we were going, but none were needed. We were there, city beside, hearts open, walls down, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to be anyone else. He may have been the boy I raised, but that night, and every moment after, he helped me find the woman I'd forgotten how to be. The one who could feel again. The one who could love again.